back live now, Rachel.
Ah, fab, okay. Shall I hand the controls back to you?
Okay, yes, indeed, if you could, please, that would be great. So we're, apologies for everyone who's dialed in today. Today's webinar is Customer Effort and the Contact Center. Had a few technical glitches with a broadband failure here, but we're now back online happily. So just as we run through the agenda, delighted to be joined today by two well-respected speakers and regulars on our webinar program. Richard Snow from Ventana Research. Welcome to you, Richard Snow.
Welcome to everyone.
And also another Richard Farrell from Netcall. Welcome, Richard.
Hi, Jonty. Afternoon, everyone.
So we're going to be looking through customer effort and the contact center. Richard Snow from Ventana is going to start with an overview of customer effort. What is it and how does it work? Richard Farrell from Netcall will be giving 5 steps or tips to providing an effortless engagement. And then Richard Snow will be running through how to measure customer effort, and we'll be following up by top tips and audience questions. Bit of housekeeping. If you want a copy of today's slides, if you'd like to go into the chat room to download those, and you type in, go into callcenterhelper.com/chat. So if you're in the chat room already, if you'd just like to log in and say hi, that would be great. And we'll be doing top tips and questions. That'll be in the chat room, and there's a bottle of champagne for the best answer. Replays are going to be available later on today. That's on the same link as you've dialed in. And then a little goodie will be sent out to you next week, which is the best practice guide to customer effort. And that will have built into it findings from this webinar. So that's going to be sent out to you then there's sort of tail end of next week, probably. On Thursday of next week. So a bit of a goodie there for you. So what I'd like everyone to do now is I'd like you to all, if you're not already, log into the chat room. That's at callcenterhelper.com/chat. In the chat room, you can download the webinar slides. That's on the right-hand side of the screen there. And I'd just like you, in 1 or 2 words, put into the chat room, how easy is it for customers to contact you? So if you just like to put in 1 or 2 words in your contact center, how easy is it for customers to contact you? And if you just like to put that into the chat room, that will be great. So a number of people typing away there. So we'll see if we can get the answers up on the screen. And while they're coming through, also want to understand from you, as well as how easy is it to contact you, what barriers get in the way of the of customers contacting you? So if you can add that in as well. So just while those results are coming through, just want to have a quick poll. And do you currently measure customer effort? So I'm just going to put the poll up on your screen there. So do you currently measure customer effort in your organization? The answers are yes, no, not yet, but thinking of doing so. So if you'd like to put those up, that would be great. So I will have a look at the results coming through. So I'd just like to go on to the poll and put that in, and then we'll get the results up on the screen here for you, and we'll see what comes out. So let's share the results up on the screen, and the results are 25% of people already have customer effort engaged. Richard Snow, I bet you're a great advocate of that. I guess you'd be very pleased.
I'm not only very pleased, but as you will see, it's very consistent with a piece of research that I've recently carried out. So pretty much in line with the industry norm.
And we've got 44% of the audience are not doing it yet, but are thinking of doing it. So Richard Farrell, I think some of your tips you've got later coming through are going to be of interest to the audience.
We'll make it easy to do.
Okay, well, let's have a look at what people are saying. people are saying we've got complicated IVR system that can stop people getting to speak to the right person. A number of people are making sort of efforts. Derek has said we've got IVR channels that make it difficult. Alexandra said sometimes it's hard because people cannot find the contact methods, so we could perhaps make it easier for them to phone or email. Jackie said traditional contact channels are available, need to embrace new technologies. That seems to be a common thread going there for. Nigel saying IVR is a common complaint. Jason said it's very easy for people to contact us, which is great. Alexandra, customer effort score is measured so far, so quite a range of different ones. Jackie said different opinions available on different channels. So one of the problems is getting consistency across the overall channels. So just hide some of the results there. So I'm going to pass the baton now across to Richard Snow from Ventana Research, and Richard's going to take us through an overview of what customer effort is and how it works. Richard Snow, across to you.
Well, I'm going to give big thumbs up to the I missed the name, but the person who said consistency is an issue, because what I stopped and looked at in my research is,
that was Jackie who said that.
Oh, well done, Jackie. What I looked at in my research was particularly from company's point of view rather than from customers' point of view. But what is clearly emerging is that your customers want to communicate with you through the channel of their choice at a time of their choice. So gone are the days where it's just the telephone, or just telephone and email. As a number of people in the chat room have suggested, you need to start looking at other channels of communication to meet those customer needs. But when it comes from the customer's particular point of view, this is largely based on my own experiences and conversations and feedback from events like this, that what you and I really want when we are engaging with someone is personalization. So I don't know about you, but I've been with my cell phone operator since 1986. I would love it if I got through to someone, they actually said, "Hello, Mr. Snow." That would increase my respect for them enormously. So personalization is important. As we go to this multi-channel environment, then being in context. So again, wouldn't it be nice if you try to do something on the web, try to do something in IVR, you end up talking to a contact center agent, but they actually knew what you were trying to do. So having things in context. But I think the biggest thing, which I've highlighted in red, is consistency. I would like to get the same answer from whatever touch point, whether it's personal, whether it's self-service, regardless of channel. I'd really like to get the same answer, and I don't have time now, but I have many examples where I can try the same thing on different channels and get a different answer. So sorry, my screen is not.
You just want to, if you carry on, Richard, we'll sort the slides out.
Okay, let's got it working. The technology is not doing well for us today. So the background to customer effort, for those of you that haven't looked into it, it actually only came around in 2008 as a result of some research carried out by this body called the Corporate Executive Board. Probably didn't become very public until it was publicized in the Harvard Business Review in 2010. So it is still quite a new concept. And they introduced the idea that what was important to customers was not necessarily being delighted, but actually wanting a solution to their issue. So you put that in kind of the layman's term, wanting to be able to get that consistent answer and get their problem solved there and then. But there was this thing about minimal effort. Now, in a recent update to their research, the Corporate Executive Board have moved away from reducing effort and the effort side of things to perhaps a more simple concept, which is what you and I want, and therefore what companies like yourself should provide is it's to make it easy for customers to engage with you, and hence that channel of choice, time of choice. So taking that all into account, I tried to search the internet and come up with a definition of customer effort. Be honest, I didn't like any of them, so I kind of put them together and said, I see customer effort as a customer-related metric that measures how easy, that word, how easy it is for customers to engage with your company. So it's a metric, but it's a measure of ease of contacting you. Now, what we looked at in my research into next generation customer engagement is what channels companies like yourselves are supporting. And we gave people a choice of, as you can see here, 12 that vary from the good old phone, email, white mail, right the way through to the very latest kinds of channels, which is mobile apps. We were talking earlier about video and use of Skype in contact centers. And now emerging things called virtual agents, which is going to be the next generation of IVR. So it's voice-activated software that's been programmed to deal with customer engagement. So what we found was that companies are supporting all of those channels now. So, but the most common are still those traditional channels. So don't necessarily run off and panic and say, oh, I need to go and look at mobile, video, social forums, and virtual agents, because today it's still very much about the phone, email, and white mail, and you need to get that right first. But increasingly, you do need to think about these other channels of communication. And of course, one of the big ones in the middle there is social media. Now, don't run away with the fact that if you introduce some of these channels, that the others will stop being used. So we actually found today that companies are deployed at an average of 7.5 channels.
And it'd be quite interesting if in the audience you could put into the chat room how many channels you're using in your contact center. If you'd like to put that into the chat room, just if you're late dialing in, the chat room is at callcenterhelper.com/chat.
Thank you, John. I'd be very interested. I'm just doing a review for a media company in the States, and I reviewed 14 contact centers there, and I can say their average was just slightly lower than this, but around 6. So between 6 and 8 channels seems to be where companies are at. And the point is,
indeed, the results coming to the chat room. We have 9517524275378264225. They're just coming through, but 6 or 7 seems to be the average from today.
Somebody have one in there?
I think there was a 1. Yeah, I may have. It's coming through so quickly I can barely read them off the screen. So no, I don't think we've had a 1 in there.
So maybe just as John plays with these numbers and tries to work out the average of those in the top of his head at 6 to 7.
I'll do the cricket scores later as well. So.
The point is that to meet that customer expectation, you do need to think about these new channels. And one thing we asked, which I haven't shown here, is none of them are going to go away. Do not believe the pundits that say customers are going to stop using the telephone. It may be the slowest growth, that's what we saw in our research, but indeed it is still growing going forward. But there's another potentially as important, if not even more important issue, which is customers want ease, they want answers, and they want them during that first engagement. And so one of the things we looked at in the same research was who within organizations are actually engaging with customers. And we gave the options of these 9 different business units. You may notice that we didn't include IT, but in fact in the questionnaire we did include IT. But on the next slide, what you can see is that customer engagement for most companies has now become an enterprise issue. These are the percentages of the responses which said these business units are proactively engaging with customers. Now you might look and say, yeah, contact center obvious, sales obvious, but there is still half of companies actually letting their customers meet them, and that's just an important channel of engagement as anything else. But increasingly things like home agents, mobile workers, but even HR and finance. So again, this ease, give the answer at the right time. If it's a billing inquiry and a call center agent can't resolve it, then get somebody from finance involved. So really much today we see customer engagement being about multiple channels, but actually multiple business units, and creating a situation where that is all easy for your customers, I would say, is no easy task. And one of the issues that we looked at is, well, how do you measure how successful you are? So what I've shown here is, again, some research which has just been published into next generation customer analytics. And we looked at 3 types of analytics. So we looked at financial metrics. How much is the customer worth, sales values, and those kind of things. We also had process metrics, so average handling time. But what we focused on, because it was customer analytics, is the customer metrics. And what you can see from the research is that there's still a focus today very much about customer satisfaction. I'm sure most of you have in your charter that you want to improve customer satisfaction. So it is still, we found, and I found after 10 years of research, the most important metric. But it's changing. And what you can see in the middle in the red is some of the more customer-related metrics coming to the fore. And in this for this particular presentation, of course, I've highlighted customer effort, which actually matches up very well with the poll earlier. And we had 27% of companies using customer effort. And this is, as I say, we're only really 4 years in to the whole concept. So that's
that ties in
quite a
very
growth.
much with the poll we had earlier, wasn't it?
Yeah,
25%.
25. So
got a fairly representative audience.
So I think what it shows is that companies are increasingly adopting this, and we'll talk about a bit later. I see from the trends that we've seen that use is going to increase. And in fact, talking about the trends, when I backtracked to 2012, which was the first time we did any research that included that as a metric, if I come back to the first one at 28%, you can see from August 2012 this steady increase in the use of customer effort, up from really threefold, from 10% to 27%. And on the basis of that, that's where I would expect to see that growth. So I just need to come back on the next slide and talk about the 28%, which looks like a bit of an anomaly. This was a particular...
We're getting a score back from the average number of channels. Got a number of people in the audience calculating the score. Today the average seems to be somewhere between about 4.5 and 4.7, depending on the total number. And Michael's probably got the most accurate number of decimal, or not necessarily the most accurate, most number of significant places, 4.695.
I'm tempted here to say get a life, but
I did ask them to, if someone had a calculator, to calculate it.
The important thing is channel of choice, time of choice, and make it easy, and give customers that answer that they're looking for straight away. So back to my anomaly of the 28% back in early 2012. This was a particularly focused piece of research, which was into customer relationship maturity. And so in this, we took a very early split into those companies that said they were very customer focused, through customer focus, somewhat customer focused, and that little 1% you can see there that didn't really care about customers at all. And what we found is that in very customer focused companies, 58% of companies there saying they were very customer focused. Within those companies, the use of customer effort is much greater than any other company. So 76% of those people, of companies in the research that said they were very customer focused, use customer effort. So the more you become now what I say truly customer focused. I would see that the use of customer effort will increase even more. And as you can see, if you just go down to even the companies that said they were customer focused, it is a lot less. So, you know, the message from there is that the more and more you focus on the customer, then more and more is the need to focus on making it easy for those customers to engage with you and start adopting this metric. And so, not surprisingly, having seen those results, you know, we actually looked at it from the outside in, from the inside out. So from companies out to customers. So we see a lot of customer satisfaction surveys. John D had some statistics early on that customer satisfaction rates have gone from 9 to 18%. But it's companies such as ourselves. You know, we had only 33% of organizations believe they're doing as good a job as they can providing customer experiences. And so over 3/4 said now a big focus moving forward in the next few years is to improve customer engagement. So 3/4 of companies latching on to the fact that it is now important business objective to improve customer engagement.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Richard. We're going to do a few, in a short while, we're going to do a few tips and questions from the audience. So if you've got any tips or questions, please type them in now. We're going to jump to a poll, and that poll is looking at what is the most important, what are the most important metrics in your organization. So if you'd just like to vote on that, the choices are average handling time, net promoter, customer effort, first contact resolution, or service level. If you'd perhaps like to select a maximum of 3. So what are the most important metrics in your organization? So a bit of a grammatical error on my mistake on the title of that one. So what are the most important metrics? We've got most of you have voted so far, so I'll just wait for a couple more to come in, and I'll share the results up on the screen now. So the winner is first contact resolution, which is a great outcome-related metric.
Wow!
And service level, I'm surprised on this one, is been narrowly relegated, almost by a hair, to service level as number 2. We've got customer effort down at more or less in line with the number of people in the audience using it. So I don't know if that's for those organizations it's possibly the most important one. Average handling time down in third place. I think that's the first time I'd seen it down at that level. Richard, I know you're not a fan of average handling time at all.
Well, I have to say, used properly, and as I'll talk about later, used in a balanced set of metric is obviously still quite an important metric, as we can see here. But I have to say, I think as John G said, he probably saw the look on my face. I am staggered and really quite impressed with 67% of you having first contact resolution as the most important metric, because it is a measure again of ease. It's what we call both it's a process and an outcome metric. So, you know, I'm doing it quickly, but I'm giving the answer, and that is what customers want. Yeah. So
I think it all ties into the fact that, you know, with things like service level, you know, there is a lot of research that says people don't mind waiting a bit longer if they're going to get their problem solved. So yeah, quite fascinating. Right, we're going to jump to some hints and tips from the audience now. And so if you'd like to use the hashtag question for a question, hashtag tip for a tip, we've got someone in the audience has said, our CEO hates IVR and therefore we don't have one. Richard Farrell, you're thinking on that?
It's not up to your CEO, it's up to your customers.
Yeah.
And if you can provide a service on IVR that customers like, that they want to use, yeah. It really should be offered because it can reduce effort.
Yeah, it is about appropriateness, I guess. Vinod has put in a tip which tied into personalization, which is to put CTI integration to show the caller name. I think that was a comment, Richard Snow, that you'd made about your mobile phone company weren't able to answer you by name.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely, I can't pronounce that name, but I absolutely agree that, you know, CTI, certainly by picking up the caller line ID and, you know, to be able to pop that screen with the name is a great way of doing this. The only thing I would say, in my personal experience, is that you need to think about the authentication process you go through, because I would love, as I said, I'd love my mobile phone operator to call me by name since I've been with them since 1986. And I do actually know the technology the agent has in front of them, so I do know they have my name. But because of the authentication process, they won't use it. So it's about process as well as technology.
Well, Vlad has asked what's the regular scale for measuring a customer effort score. We're going to be coming to that in a later section. So Vlad, if you'd like to stay during the webinar, we'll be onto the whole measurement mechanism in Richard Snow's second part. Sonia has put a tip: train your executives to do next issue resolution at first contact with the customer. So I think that's probably quite a sensible thing to do. And we've got a question from Vlad. Let's say we have we'll come on to the scale later. We don't want to spoil all that. Umar said, we like customers to self-serve due to the nature of our business, and we're a daily deal site, and at times the answers can't come from us. They come from third party, as they have all the information, so we tend to direct them to the correct party. Would this affect customer effort scores? Rich Farmer, I know you're a great fan of self-service, but sometimes you don't know the answer.
Yeah, and there's also a correlation, it would appear, between number of transfers and customer effort scores. So I suppose there's two angles here. You'd have to, again, look at the business process, but if the call's coming to you and it doesn't have the information, is it going to the right place? Is the contact channel, is that the appropriate way to get that information to you? So you have to look a bit more at the business process there, I think.
Yeah, some organisations are quite smart on handling off. I booked through a hotel recently where I did a web chat with a travel company, and they actually web chatted the hotel while I was online, and got me the answer back from the hotel while I was online on the web chat. So it was one web chat led to another web chat. It was all done first contact resolution, which was great, and I got a nice room with a sea view, which is what I wanted, which was rather nice. And another question, Nina says, would you typically measure customer effort score alongside Net Promoter Score, and is there a strong correlation? Richard Snow, I can see you're smiling.
I wish you hadn't have asked me that one.
Can we have to condense our
I'm going to go back to my what I will talk about later. Is the important thing is a balanced set of metrics. You know, no one metric is the answer, whether it's customer effort or it's Net Promoter. You cannot run a contact center, you cannot run customer engagement just on using one metric. You need to have a balance, and you need to decide that from a business perspective. So, you know, average handling time, it's good for working out number of resources. Customer effort is good for measuring how easy it is. Net Promoter, I have to say I'm not a great fan of Net Promoter, but you know, it's a measure of likely referrals. So the important thing is a balanced set of metrics that aligns to your business and what you want as the outcomes.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. We're going to come back to questions and tips in a little while. Now we're going to hand across to Richard Farrell from Netcall. Richard's going to take us through 5 steps to providing an effortless service to your customers. So, Richard Farrell, would you like to take us through your thoughts?
Thanks very much, John T. I'll just do a brief introduction. I'm CTO at Netcall. I've now been around the contact center industry for 19 years in the UK, and what we're going to present to you today include findings from industry and technology analysts, including Richard and Ventana. We've got a little bit of research from Ofcom in there,
Fabulous.
but also what's really important to us is we've got input from some of our 700 customers, and that's where it really comes to life. So rather than the dry academic stuff, we have real customers with real examples. So interestingly, of course, those questions just a moment ago have rather stolen my thunder on what influences customer effort, because the first point that I'm going to make is that it's not just one measure. And if we think that we can throw away every other metric and just use a customer effort score, I'm afraid we're going to be a bit disappointed. So I think
Sounds like we have a couple of disappointed people in the audience.
because what it's important to understand is the underlying dimensions which impact on the customer effort score. So it's really important to have a structured method to identify the impact of, for example, contact frequency, IVR response, so that includes the use, the number of options, the resolution rates. Time on hold is an interesting one. Transfers is interesting. What you should be doing is having a look at what, for example, time on hold does to your customer effort score. For some environments, for some sorts of calls, customers are happy to trade time on hold against first contact resolution. In other environments, it's going to have a real impact on your customer effort. So you need to have a look at the underlying dimensions. And what you can do then once you've got that measurement and analysis is identify actions to improve performance. And there will be a cost benefit to that as well. So it may be that the use of technology may be able to help improve performance in some areas, but in other areas you may just need to make it easier for customers to talk to agents and advisors. Going back to the CEO question earlier on, and my CEO doesn't like IVR, there's some great research that Ofcom conducted on communication choices, and what they found was that they couldn't just do a really rigorous correlation just based on age. There was a bit more to it than that. So although our always-on consumers, who include our Generation Ys and the teenagers who are posting everything on Twitter and they're always online, it isn't just correlated to age. So we'll probably all have examples of the Silver Surfer and our granny who's on Facebook and Twitter all the time. One thing which is important here in the context of customer effort is to have a look at the detached segment who are over on the right-hand side. And this is about 16% of UK adults. And the detached consumer really likes automated services because they believe it's made communication easier. So if we're talking about effort and we're talking about customer ease, then for lots of consumers, automated services make it much easier for them to do it.
And we've in fact had a question in from Sarah who said, is there a conflict between customer effort and self-serve? And I think the answer is that if people can self-serve, then...
Yeah, absolutely. And we're really, in a couple of slides, there's a couple of points around that as well. So absolutely, there can be a conflict, and it depends why you're trying to deploy automated services as well.
Yes.
Because your customers will work out what you're trying to achieve. Just before we get into the 5 steps, one thing which is very important, and Richard has mentioned in terms of the balanced approach to measurement, is that it's really important to link measurements to business objectives. We handled the Metrics That Matter webinar a few months back, really enlightening research, and something that we've looked at in some detail is some work from the Professional Planning Forum, and they have come up with the concept of a KPI pyramid, which is really, really interesting. So I'd recommend anyone to go back to the history of the webinar to have a look through that in more detail. But an important point is, do the contact center measurements align with the business objectives? So if there is a business objective, for example, to reduce money or reduce cost to serve, that may not align so well with some of your contact center objectives. So do business objectives include customer effort, Net Promoter Score, customer satisfaction? It's important that we don't just look at the contact center in isolation. As we've seen on the slide with the different areas within businesses, within departments, it's important to get consistency of approach and scoring right across the organization. So make sure business objectives include customer effort if you're going to use that in the contact center. You also need to ensure that key performance indicators, which may or may not link to business objectives, so be careful on that one, and this is often where AHT gets mixed up as a key performance indicator when it's really probably an operational measurement rather than a target.
Too true.
So if you're being beaten up to reduce average handle time, that may have an impact on first contact resolution. It will have an impact on customer effort. So make sure that your KPIs don't go out of their way to increase effort. So just a bit of background there. Make sure you link to the objectives. There's lots of stuff going on. Step one is really to optimize low effort channels for transactions. And I'm making the point here about transactions, not interactions. And by transactions, I really mean interactions, engagements that are based on structured data and structured business processes. So the classic examples are things like balance inquiries for banks. So this is some organized structured data in the background, and it's a defined process for the user interface. When we get to an interaction, especially when they become complex or emotional, then it may not be appropriate to automate. So I think that goes back to our earlier question. It depends what you're trying to automate. And transactions, great. Interactions, perhaps not so. Customers like automation and self-service if it works for them. And the classic analogy is the cash point, the hole in the wall. Who would ever dream now of queuing up in a bank branch for a face-to-face interaction to get some money? You just go to, you use automation because it works for you. Too much self-service can increase customer effort, especially if it's complex or emotional. And one thing that may be interesting, a really interesting question to survey your customers, is how many of them started off on your website before they got to the contact center, and also how many of them are on your website during the conversation. So I saw some interesting numbers yesterday where more than half of people have been on the web before they've made a call, and around a third of people are actually on the web during the call. And one thing that we're starting to get back as a really interesting bit of negative feedback is in-queue messages which tell people, have you tried our website? Have you looked at our FAQs? Have you tried our knowledge base on the website? Because you may find that half or more of your callers are actually calling because they haven't been able to get that answer on your website.
Yeah, too true.
So make sure you've got that aligned. And if self-service cannot resolve the issue, I saw this coming up in the chat room as well, provide effortless routes to agents. And those effortless routes can be things like web chat, it can be callback as well. So make sure you make it easy, reduce that effort for your customer. Don't try and give them some FAQs on the website that can't answer the question and then have a cryptic puzzle to try and find where the contact information is and then make them dial a number.
Yeah.
Make it easy, reduce that effort. In terms of self-service, identify the issues with self-service failure and determine the cost-benefit of resolution. So it may be that some of the things that you're trying to automate are going to be too hard, that it's not going to be possible, it's going to be too unstructured and becomes too much of a technical challenge, and the actual cost to resolve it may be too high. So think about the different approaches. And just to reiterate on that final point, don't forget that many callers will prefer self-service. So different types of communicators at different times for different reasons will want to self-serve, so that can reduce effort. Okay. One thing that we've had as feedback from our customers is really the importance of the consolidated view, the golden thread. In the 21st century, it should not be the case that customers have to repeat information, either information they provided over the web through a mobile app to another agent, to another department. There's absolutely no excuse for it. We need to make it easy, both for your customers, but also for your agents, and provide a consolidated view. And again, the consolidated view, there are lots of benefits in there, but not least ease of use for agents and therefore customers, but also you will improve quality and reduce costs as well. And the consolidated view may be multiple systems, but also think about the way that your current systems may make your agents have to navigate multiple screens. So there's lots of solutions where you can just provide that in one simple view. Because customers are dealing with multiple departments across multiple channels, you need to have that joined up as well with a consolidated view. So classic examples are when marketing departments target people who currently have outstanding bills with finance, and then the contact center in the middle takes the hot prospect who wants to buy something, then has to tell them they can't buy it because their account is stopped currently by finance. So try and join things up. Also, deliveries and so on. There's no excuse for the contact center not to have that information. And we even find organizations where they have payment solutions which are then not directly and instantly linked to CRM. So a customer will make a payment either on the web or through a telephony user interface. They'll then ring the contact center, and the contact center won't know that the payment's gone through, which really is shocking, really, in the 21st century. And win-win there. You'll improve quality and experience, and you'll improve productivity. As we move into the new world with different media and different channels, one thing it's important to do is to be proactive about feedback. So don't wait for the customer to complain. Something to do is to survey. By survey, it's important to understand that doesn't mean asking every caller at every time the same questions. The good thing about contact centers is that we have plenty of calls in most circumstances. Yeah. So by appropriate use of statistics and appropriate sample sizes, you can actually get really, really powerful information without having to do it for everybody and run an issue of survey fatigue. And in this instance, we're going to say ask the question. And I won't steal Richard Snow's thunder with what the question is. We'll get onto that into the next part.
But that is the customer effort question.
It is the customer effort question, but exactly how it's formed and how you score it is important. And that was one of the questions earlier. How do you score it as well?
Indeed.
So if you're doing the appropriate samples and you're looking at channels and you're looking at different sorts of interactions, it's important to determine what was high effort. And then you can pick out whether it's a process issue that's in your control, if it's something that's outside your control, what you can do about it. Is it customer education? Is it agent training? Find out what was high effort and then plan to resolve it. Okay, step 4. There's a little link at the bottom of the slide here to a nice Twitter search, which is the term on hold with. And as we move forward with increasing use of cloud and social and mobile devices and loads of unstructured information out there, what you will find is that callers will be tweeting whilst they're on hold to your contact center. So in real time, they'll be tweeting.
And that's the link in grey at the bottom of the screen if people who haven't spotted it.
Yeah, so have a search just on the term on hold with on Twitter and see what you find. And you know, if you're unlucky, you might find your organisation in there, but people will tweet in real time. An important thing to do is to call at a busy interval and to live the caller experience. Having a look at monthly stats at the end of the month that says you've got an 80-20 service level, well, that's great, and that might be something that you can pass on in the internal hierarchy, but for your customers who are in the 20%, it's not great, and especially at peak times, it's not great. So I would say it's very important to test the end-to-end process, including any IVR and queue experience. So don't just rely on the stats. Think about a formal process to test and go through the whole process. It's also important these days to monitor social media with what customers are saying. And one of the tips that we got through earlier was about prevent the next inbound contact. So this is about being proactive on the contact, next call resolution. To try and work out, and social media is a great way of doing that. And whilst I was looking at on hold with earlier in the week,
I just checked. It looks like Scottish Power is the one that's being complained about today.
You're not allowed to do that, because I went out of my way to try and find an organisation that wasn't going to be on the webinar. So I found one which was Sun Country Air. And I had a look at this, and I thought I understood what it meant. And there are some great tools out there to try and extract sentiment from 140 characters to see if it's good news or bad news. And I had a look at this, and I thought I understood what it meant. And then I checked with my wife, and she had a different view on it. So I'm going to offer a prize of a bottle of champagne if somebody can translate that tweet and tell me what it really means. Because I think what it might mean is that if you can match your hold music to your customer, so if it's a Johnny Cash fan and you can provide it, and you match up with their spirit animal, they may not mind in-queue music, but I'm not so sure. So I'm going to offer a prize of a bottle of champagne for the best explanation of what that means.
Well, maybe there's we'd need to invent a system where you can map on-hold music to the individual.
There's been some research in that in the past for different demographics, yeah.
Oh, fair.
Beatles tends to go down well, apparently. My final step is to be proactive, and one thing that I wanted to bring here was something that John T had mentioned to us when we were doing the preparation for this slide, and that's the very positive feedback he gets around the use of queue buster and callback in the contact center space to reduce customer effort. And to put that in a bit more context, the queuing and contact routing models in the contact center were pretty much invented in the 1970s.
Indeed. Yeah.
Now there's a link at the bottom to a great piece of work that Jonty's done on call center history, because the call center has an urban myth that I used to believe as well, and the urban myth is around who started the contact center and when and for what purpose. So I recommend having a look at Jonty's article, because I think he's uncovered earlier contact centers than the urban myth. But the queuing and contact models are inadequate for today's customer, and as we say, you put someone on hold, they're going to be tweeting in real time. So the first alternative to that is a scheduled callback. That can be either by a telephone or on the web, and this changes the queue model and it shifts the call time, and by empowering the caller and shifting the control, then you reduce customer effort, and the feedback we get from that is great. Customers are delighted. Also, they also think it's a wow factor as well, so you can really differentiate your service.
It does make it an awful lot easier. I've used it a few times, and yeah, it sort of cuts the whole psychology of sitting in a queue really out of it.
So there are my 5 steps to providing effortless engagement. Link measurements to business objectives, optimize low-effort channels for transactions, use the golden thread for the consolidated view, live the experience, don't just rely on the stats, seek the feedback and act on it, and with a bit of an oxymoron, respond proactively, i.e. get in advance of the complaint, do stuff before it becomes a business issue.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Rich Farrell, and we've had some feedback. We think the spirit animal, Jacob and Teresa thinks it comes from the film Fight Club, where he had a penguin as a spirit animal. So, so that's where the etymology of it, I think, comes from. So,
okay, that's more questions than answers for me there.
I think we may be getting Netflix out and seeing if we can watch Fight Club. So I've not seen that film. Not seen that film myself. Right, we're just going to jump to a quick poll now, and we looked at customer feedback as the one of the things to help identify and reduce customer effort. So I'd like to know from you, how do you collect customer feedback? Do you use post-call IVR surveys? Do you use email surveys? Do you use an SMS text survey? Or do you use customer focus groups, or indeed a written survey? So if you'd just like to vote on that, I think you can only I think you can vote for all that apply on that. So if you'd just like to vote, we're starting to get the answers coming through, and I'll just show the results up on the screen. And surprisingly, email survey comes up top on there. Post-call IVR survey, which is actually a very good way of getting customer feedback, down at 37%, and customer focus groups, 29%. I think the always problem I find with focus groups is the one thing that they don't do is actually focus on the issue at hand. So some quite interesting feedback there. Right, we're going to have a jump now to some of the top tips and questions from the audience. Here's a nice tip from Michael. Test all processes and technology on your granny. If she likes it, you're on to a winner, Rich Farrell.
Absolutely agree with that, and that's the opposite of that. My CEO doesn't like it. You may find that your granny likes automated processes if it works for her.
Yeah, I think it's all down to ease of use, and it's sort of making stuff simple is actually surprisingly complex and involved to do that. Sarah says, ask your customers, include them in any development and user testing. Don't assume what makes it easy. So I certainly think that's some good advice there. And something that I think, Richard, will be quite close to your heart, join up channels when looking at service design rather than looking at them in isolation. There's a danger of isolated thinking.
Absolutely. In fact, Jonty and I, in fact, Richard as well attended a expo in London yesterday called Connected Business, and actually I think that was a brilliant title for the show, and that's what it's all about. It is connecting the business. It's about connecting channels, it's about connecting business units, and it's about connecting data. So as you go about this, then you have to think about things as a whole, And I'll just remark that if I could get my nanny to use a mobile phone, then I think that was a triumph.
Wonderful. So we've got, why not tell your callers at the start of the call, there'll be a survey at the end. We touched on IVR surveys. And you might have said, we just introduced personal cues to agents. The customer adds the 4-digit number that the agent has given them from a prior call, and it goes directly to that agent. It's seamless and provides to be working well. I guess that's a sort of cleverish use of IVR. But I probably could be a little bit clever in this again, couldn't you?
It's great if the people are there and you don't obviously replace the productivity benefits of having a pool of agents with individual queues. So there's some operational challenges there. But certainly that personalization and matching the agents to the caller is very important.
Teresa's asked, can you tell us why you're not a fan of Net Promoter Score? Be interested to know if those reasons relate to Teresa's business. I'm not sure how long we've got for this. This one is the short 5-second answer.
It's my 5-second answer. How many times has anybody asked you why you bought anything?
Very good, very good. That's almost another question in itself. And last question before we jump on to another part. We're aiming to anticipate customer questions. We run annual events with proactive communications. Does anyone else do this, and how? So if there's anyone in the audience who looking to anticipate customer questions, would be interesting to see. I don't know if you can get that from a database of previous events you've run before, or don't know. Maybe that's a focus group. But
I'll come to some suggestions around that.
Okay, we'll come to that in a little bit. Right, we're going to jump back now to the bit about the mechanics of the customer effort score, and that certainly has changed in the 3 years since it was first put out in an article in Harvard Business Review, or first made public attention. So Richard Snow, would you like to share your slides on this?
Yeah, in fact, again, I like the question about doing things in isolation, because I just want to remind everybody that back in the good old days, the customer cycle was pretty simple: marketing, sales, service, and then retain the customer. And pretty well, marketing did the first, sales did the second, service did the third, and so on. But if you actually stop and look at your organization, and one of the things we found in that research about very customer-focused companies, what you'll actually find is that there's many different business units involved in each part of that cycle now, and there is lots of different communication channels involved. So even that simple process through marketing, sales, and services and retention has become complex. And what this does, and again, another thing from the research on customer relationship maturity, almost universally those companies were mapping what's called the customer journey. So understanding how customers are using different channels to do different things, and how they're moving from one channel to the next, and being really all-inclusive here and saying, well, given that it is all about the totality, then you may be running TV or newspaper adverts, and really what you should be doing is seeing what they generate, where they are generating interactions, and making sure that people are prepared to answer questions based on those. So we have increasingly this focus on the customer journey. So within all of this complexity, how do we manage the customer effort? Somebody asked the question, what is the question? Well, as I said, the customer effort board has moved on from its early research and refined its question. And this is the question, folks. This is not my interpretation of the question. This is about one of the only times I have quoting ad verbatim, because I felt that this is the question that the CEB is now saying you should use. And note, in the middle there, it has changed to easy. So it's still, although it's still talking about measuring customer effort, the wording has become, in a sense, more customer related, and saying how easy was it for me to handle my issue. And you have a 7-point scale, as you can see, and that's the question. And what you should be doing is asking that question at each of those touch points. So at each of those different channels, you can be asking that question. And once again, I would say that you should be, the best practice would be, is that you should be asking that question. You go back to what people are using as surveys, emails, and surveys and post-call asks. You should be asking that question through the channel, through different channels. So if it's a text message, maybe you text the message back. If it's social media, maybe you do it there. So look at the technology you use to ask that question. But really what we would say is you need customer effort across all of that journey. And to do that, and as you're doing that, again, going back to what Richard said, it's not just about understanding that effort score, that ease score. It is about understanding the outcomes. So we talk about outcomes. So understanding, yes, it was easy or difficult, but what was the result? And so whether it's a new sale, upsale, whether you lowered cost, increased cost, you need to keep that in mind. So to achieve that picture, what we ask companies is how they're doing that. And an increasing use of analytics, okay? I think Richard was saying if you're using analytics at different points and different channels, you can actually derive a lot about customer effort from those insights. So if you were using speech analytics on some of your call recordings, instead of just looking at the agent side of the conversation, look at the customer side of the conversation. And if the customer's first thing he says, I've been on your website and it was awful, you have a measure instantly of that effort. So not huge take-ups yet of things like speech and text, and even the desktop. So understanding what the agents do to try and resolve that can be an indicator of the effort. So what I would say is going forward, yes, ask that question, ask it through the channel of the choice, but start to look at some of the analytics tools. And picking up on what Jonty said, one way you can anticipate questions is now looking at predictive analytics. So if you're looking at what customers have said to you on the phone in the past, you can use predictive analytics and say, there's a likelihood they'll go on asking that same question. So coming back to both people's point is do something about it. I've often been asked, how do you do call avoidance? And the easiest way to do call avoidance is find out what the problem is, put it right, and then the customers won't ring you.
Thank you very much for that. We're going to jump now. We're running a little bit short of time. We're just going to jump back to some of the key takeaways from today. And then what we'll do is we'll do a few minutes questions and answers in overtime, if you like, in extra time, if anyone's still with us. So Richard Farrell, if you'd like to sort of summarize, what would you say are the key takeaways from customer effort?
Okay, so the first recommendation really is always to make sure you align with business objectives. So can't use it on its own. Use a balanced set of metrics. I think we're consistent around this. Define the processes and use some workflows as well, so you can make things automated, make it easier for you. And one thing that we see, for example, is you can link a post-call survey response to a proactive call to try and investigate a bit further. So if someone's got a really bad score or really negative analytics, then why not put that into a process to ask them more about it? Harness the available technology. There's lots of good stuff out there, especially for the social channels. Also, be aware that new channels reduce intimacy. So in 140 characters, it's very hard to explain what you mean with your spirit animal, and you can confuse people very easily. But they're also much more happy to complain as well. So be aware of that.
Indeed. And Richard Snow, what are your key recommendations?
My four are that if you're not using customer effort, we do believe in that trend, that it's something you should consider. But again, as we've all been saying, have it as part of a balanced set of metrics. On its own, it's not enough. It needs to be a set of balanced metrics. You do need to have processes and technology to capture it. So, agents need they need a process which say if they need to ask it, they ask it, or you have other technology. So ask that question as many times as you can, at many points of many touch points as you can, and use appropriate technology to do it. on my third is you need to train people, obviously, but more importantly, again, as we said, it's been often quoted, there's no point measuring things if you don't do anything about it. And the same is absolutely true here. It's not saying I want to get my customer effort to 1. It's about saying this is where I am, how am I going to get it, and how am I going to improve? So I have that improvement program. And my fourth would be to get that wider picture, look at the analytics technologies that are around which can help map that customer journey, but can actually give you some insights about effort without actually even asking that question. So they would be my 4 takeaways.
Well, thank you very much. That's all we've got for us. The formal part of today's webinar. I'm going to keep the lines open, and our speakers will stay on for a few more minutes to go through some of the hints and tips. So thank you for joining us with today, and thank you to our speakers, Richard Farrell and Richard Snow. And thank you for everyone in the audience if you've got to go across to a 2 o'clock meeting now. If you do have a couple of extra minutes, we're going to pick up some questions and top tips now. So we'll just pull those up on the screen here. We've got a large number of top tips and questions. Paul has put through a tip saying, offering choices, give customers a chance to pick from more than one solution. I guess it's not always one size fits all. Alexandra said, immediate communication to the customer you're representing and the faults identified by the customers regarding the tools, products or services used. Often can, I find, sort of pacify things for a customer if you say, oh, yes, this is a problem that we're aware of and we're working.
And there's plenty of research to show that they're actually more loyal if you resolve an issue than if there was never an issue in the first place. I think it also to some extent linked into that earlier feedback about using email surveys. The challenge with that is it's not immediate, so you may find that you're getting measured on things which are outside your control at a later date, whereas if you can do something on a call, for example, it's immediate and linked into that interaction. So it's immediate.
Excellent. Let's pick up another one. Make customer service a part of all verbal or written job descriptions, no matter the function or level. In hiring interviews, orientation, and in the job training, emphasize that everyone is in the customer service business, not just the customer service department, I guess. And make sure that all employees understand how they directly or indirectly touch the customer, because ultimately it's the customer that pays the bills there. Sanjaya says using multi-skilled agents so customers get everything done from one person rather than getting transferred around. I think sort of multi-skilling is quite important, but sometimes for product resolution you do need to escalate off to a product expert.
Yeah, I suppose the thing to do there is make sure you do the routing to the right skill, or the right skill sets. So if it does require that technical resource, make sure you find out a way of routing it.
Yeah. Rebecca says sells to the customer, though they want to be sold to. Karen said an example of reducing customer effort could be when a customer purchases a new phone and his stated need is to buy the phone and set it up. Yet if the provider foresees the implicit need to transfer contacts to the new phone and proactively offers the solution, then a future customer contact is prevented and the customer effort on his phone activation is reduced. I think that's quite clever.
Yeah, I would say, Karen, I'm not sure if you actually work for the company that I'm going to quote as an example, but one cell phone operator actually discovered that 75% of customers that bought an iPhone within 24 hours spent a good half an hour on the phone to the contact center saying, I can't make this work. So they introduced a new process where if anybody bought an iPhone in a store, they were not allowed to walk out of the store front door until they'd made their first phone call, because it took 2 minutes for the person behind the desk to tell them how to do it.
Ah, that's a very good piece of advice. Vinod says that first contact needs to be measured against total calls handled to be a true measure of the percentage of customers delighted, rather than considering first call resolution against first call opportunities. It gives a more true effort and will avoid repeats being ignored and piling up. So I think I'd need to think through some of the detail of that one. Michael has said, ask your staff what their ideas are and get everyone focused on getting things right first time. Certainly quite sensible. We're going to take a couple of questions now that we've got coming through. Another one, what's the concern with NPS? Perhaps we've got time for the slightly longer answer, Richard, now.
Well, the longer answer is not much longer than my response previously. Net Promoter has become a very popular metric, and the essence of it is, are you going to recommend me? So I think if you're going to do that, you need the process of when you sell something to someone is asking, why did you buy that? Unless you can't measure whether your Net Promoter Score is actually delivering any new business. Right, that's my concern.
And I just have a concern that it works fine if you're trying to sell things, because you're not always trying to sell something. So certainly for public sector, it's a very hard one to recommend a local authority without having to move your house. So it doesn't fit for all organisations.
Right, I'm going to take two more questions now. And Derek has said, no matter how clear we make our IVR, we still have customers not listening and getting to the wrong place. Any thoughts on how to make this better? We transfer way more than we should all over our organisation. Any thoughts?
Well, the first one is to understand why they're calling and whether it's something that you triggered. So, of course, the classic stuff is that you will send out a bill or a changed format in a bill, and then you'll get a peak of demand following that. So find out why they're calling, and then you can have a good chance of understanding where to route them. Also, if you get really smart with things like, as mentioned earlier, about using your CTI to look up in CRM databases, again, you can find out if they're in the middle of a case that's already open. You can find out if there's a delivery that's outstanding. So you can do a lot of work in advance. There's a good probability that you'll probably be able to get up to about 80% of the inbound contacts with some idea of why they're calling you before they've actually picked up the phone.
Yep.
I think that for me the bottom line is sit back and decide why you had IVR. Having been in the contact center industry now for 25 years, IVR was introduced to do call routing. How annoyed do you get when you fill in 5 pieces of information and the first thing the agent says is, why are you calling? But more fundamentally than that is my recommendation, if you go to the extreme, is get your customers to design your IVR, not you. Get it to do what they want. Think about customer effort. It's about ease. Too many IVRs are designed to do what the company wants to do, not what the customer wants. And I'm making this point about anything in self-service. If you're going to do self-service and you want customers to use it and you want them to like to use it, get them to design it.
Yeah. And my little bit of advice to add in is that there's also the danger of what I call the one number trap, which is you have one number strategy, but having a one number strategy doesn't mean to say you have to have one number. If you're sending out a bill, you can put a number on top of the bill that directs someone straight to your billing department. It doesn't. It doesn't be. You can add saying, if you've got a query about this bill, phone this number. You can still have your one number strategy for Yellow Pages, your adverts on TV, but one number strategy doesn't mean necessarily one number. Right, we're going to take the final question. How do you differentiate between the agent and process in relation to customer effort? Should you specify in the question or ask the same question at different points in the process? Richard Farrell, I think you alluded to the fact that you can ask different questions and still be statistically valid.
Yeah, and we also, before we started on the webinar, we talked about the scenario with Net Promoter Score where the contact center was scoring very highly, but then there was a tariff change external to the contact center, and the contact center scores went down. Nothing they could do about it. So I would try and ensure that you sample at different points in the process, and then try and find out if there's a correlation between agent and score, and then also look in the background with process and score. So with the appropriate data and appropriate sample sizes, it should be easy enough to identify the trends.
Okay, well thank you very much for that. We've reached the end of extra time now. Just a reminder, if you'd like to put into our chat box in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about today's webinar? If you want a copy of the slides, if you go to callcenterhelper.com/, webinars. You'll be able to get copies of the slides from it. Lindley will be sending out a best practice guide, including the feedback from today's webinar, tail end of next week on Thursday. If you want to watch the replay, same link as you've dialed in today. I know a lot of you will be wanting to share this with your team and with your management team in a number of cases as well. And we've got some more webinars in the series. So just like to say thank you to our two speakers. Thank you, Richard Snow, for participating today.
Thank you, and thank everybody for listening.
And thank you to Richard Farrell for joining us today as well.
Thanks very much, and thanks for your
attention. And thank you to everyone in the audience, and we'll see you next week. Thank you. And if you could fill the survey at the end of the webinar, we'll be getting our customer feedback that way. Thank you then. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.